Welcome to another edition of Scary Stories. This is the series in which we relive and retell your real life experiences. Today, we'll be covering some Home Alone stories that are going to chill you to the bone. So sit back, relax, and let's just jump into it. Let's begin with our first story, The Construction Workers. Listening to your videos has reminded me of an experience I had when I was in junior high school. So we're talking about early 2000s, around 2003, 2004. During this time, it was just myself and my mother, and I would often stay home by myself. My mom, like any busy parent, was working a full-time job at a local bank. Meanwhile, I went to school. Now, since I did get home at around 3:30 p.m., I'd only have to be by myself for a couple of hours. Thus, the worries of anything going wrong were the least of my concerns. Besides, if I ever needed anything, I could go over to my neighbor's house. So, with those details, let's set the scene, shall we? It was a cold winter afternoon in Kentucky, and I was returning from a long day of classes. The bus drops me off at the usual spot, and my friend Samantha accompanies me to my neighborhood. We say our goodbyes as she heads to her house, and I go to mine. When I could see my house, however, I saw an unmarked minivan parked in the driveway. To coincide with the minivan, I also saw a man dressed in what looked to be like city construction worker clothing, and he's peeking through the front windows, and it looks like he's trying to open them. He had one of those construction hats, and one of those bright and orange-yellow vests. I remember calling out to him with confusion and saying, "Hi there, excuse me, was there something you needed help with?" He turns around before responding with a simple,
Ah, yes. I'm with the city. We're just checking homes at the moment. Are your parents home?
I tell him it was just myself and my mom, but she wasn't here. Big mistake, by the way. And he says he would come back later when she arrived. Now, at the time, I didn't think too much of the encounter. All I was looking forward to was throwing my backpack over the couch, relaxing with snacks, and celebrating the arrival of the weekend. But looking back on it at the moment, so many things were suspicious. For one, I recall his minivan having no sort of logo or indication of it belonging to a city worker. And two, he was trying to open the window. Very strange, but I would soon put this behind me. I want to say it was about, 2 hours later. My mom calls me saying she was running a bit late. She did, however, tell me she would bring some Pizza Hut, which instantly made up for her being tardy for our dinner. So, now it's around 6:30 p.m. It's dark outside, and I was upstairs in my room drawing or something. I had a little bit of music playing, and I recall hearing a window opening. The only reason I recognized the noise was because one of the bedroom windows had a tendency of producing this really squeaky sound. It'd always wake me up anytime my mom opened it. Well, I found this odd as I recall thinking maybe my mom was home. I take a peek out the upstairs window, however, and I remember seeing a familiar vehicle. It wasn't my mom's car, but instead, it was an unmarked minivan. Very coincidental, all things considered. I started to get a bit nervous, so to calm my nerves, I slowly open my bedroom door, and I take a peek from the upstairs walkway. What I saw walking around in my house was absolutely frightening. There are two men dressed up in construction worker outfits, and each have large knives. Seeing that, I get the chills. Thus, I quickly head back to my room, before realizing there's no phone. This was a time when cell phones were slowly making their rounds, but this was mostly to the adults and the parents. I didn't have one, thus I'd have to use the house phone. But there's a problem. The only phone we have is downstairs in the kitchen. I'd have to literally dodge and sneak around these two strangers just to attempt to call for someone. And that's not taking into consideration waiting there as I talk to them. This left only one option, getting out of the house. However, I don't even get a chance to head to the front door, because I began to hear footsteps quietly making their way up. Once again I get the chills, because I remember the only rooms up here are mine and the restroom. I knew they'd try to open my door at any moment, and sure enough, I could start to see and hear the doorknob budging. One thing I should mention is the locking mechanism on my door doesn't exactly work properly. It's notorious for opening, even when you've locked it. I remember holding back tears and time freezing still as they began kicking, doing what they could to make their way in. I was running out of time, and I knew I had to make an escape. Thus, I head over to my bedroom window, but just as I'm about to jump out, I hear the door break down. I turn around, and the two immediately see me, and they start approaching. I went ahead and jumped out, landing on my front yard. Unfortunately, I also sprained my ankles in the process, but with all the adrenaline I had, I'm able to run across the street. When I arrived at my neighbor's front door, I began knocking and knocking, but no one answered, and I remember at that moment they were on vacation. I was now so scared because the two robbers might go after me. So I quickly crawl over to a nearby tree and I look over to my home. All in all, it was about 3 minutes later, and the two robbers run out of my front door with these large, heavy-duty backpacks. I then see as they jump into their minivans, and they drive away. Fast forward 15 minutes later, and I'm sitting there on my neighbor's front porch in pain, and that's when I see my mom's car pull up. Naturally, she must have been confused to see the front door open, but she became even more concerned when I yelled to her from across the street. In summary, I went to get my ankles checked up on, and we called the police. 2 weeks later, the men were caught, and they were connected with another series of break-ins. Unfortunately, we never did get back the jewelry or the money they stole, which was sort of a bummer. But I'm just thankful things didn't turn out for the worse. Story number 2. Disguised Burglars. This took place roughly 3 years ago, when I'd gone to visit family who was living in Chihuahua, Mexico. For quick reference, I'm male and I was 14. Anyways, the trip would last 2 weeks, and it saw us catching up with family and traveling to various different locales. On one evening, I was feeling a bit under the weather, and I spent most of the day in bed, watching TV. Honestly, I was doing all I could to get better, as my uncle was throwing a birthday party for my cousin. I wanted to go, but it just wasn't happening. So somehow, I was able to convince my whole family to leave me at the house by myself while they went for the festivities. My mom stayed with me for about an hour, but eventually I convinced her to leave. Fast forward about 3 hours since they left, my mom calls me, and she's saying they were about an hour from arriving back. No problem, as I was starting to feel a lot better. However, feeling better would change when a particular creepy event takes place. I should quickly mention that my Spanish isn't exactly the best. I can get by and understand mostly everything, but oftentimes my mom or dad has to tell me what was said. Well, wouldn't you know it, I started to hear knocking at the front door. I listened for about 20 seconds, until I heard somebody say police in Spanish. Abre por favor. Somos la policía. Necesitamos entrar y hablar contigo. And that was more or less what they said. By the way, I had my mom write that out for me. All I understood was police, thus I head over to the front door not thinking twice. When I open it, 3 masked men that are armed with pistols barge into the house, and they demand I stay quiet and do what they say. One thing was obvious. They weren't police, as they had no sort of uniform. It's at this point one of them says,
¿Dónde está tu baño?
or where is your restroom? It was a very weird question, but I answer it as I nervously lead them there, fearing the worst.
Quédate allí dentro. No te vamos a hacer nada. Nomás haga lo que te vamos a decir. Quédate aquí y no haces ningún ruido.
Or for those who don't speak Spanish, he says,
Stay in there. We don't want to hurt you, so stay in here and don't make a sound.
Thus, as 2 of them proceed to storm the home for valuables, the third one kept an eye on me, as he stood guard at the restroom door. After what seemed like an eternity, the man who'd stood at the door said something like,
Ya nos vamos. Gracias, chamaco. Thanks, kid. We're leaving now.
They then leave, and I sat there nervously trying to recollect what had just taken place. Was the house Seriously robbed? If so, should I have been thankful they didn't decide to take me out as well? Nevertheless, I run over to some neighbor's home as I tried in my best Spanish to explain what had just happened to me. They were an elderly couple, by the way. Well, they called police and they showed up about 30 minutes later. By this point, my family had come back to see the absolute mess I was in, along with the home. As you might have already picked up on, those three weren't police officers. But sadly, we never did hear on whether or not they were caught. That's what makes the whole thing creepy. Story number 3. Secret Basement Room. Imagine both yourself and your wife moving into a brand new home, excited and ready to begin your life together. Sounds like a dream come true. It was after a while, but when we first moved in, things were a bit weird. Let me take you back to 2013, when my wife and I moved into our brand new home in the English countryside. It was your fairly average Victorian-style home, 2 stories with 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and a basement. My wife and I took the upstairs bedroom, while the others acted as guest rooms. The basement was the location of the laundry and dryer machines, where I also set up a pool table and a small TV for when our friends and family would come over. Over 2 months of us living there, we started to notice things that were a bit off. It started with us finding food missing when we had done grocery shopping. Then, we would find that the shampoo and toilet paper was starting to run out faster than normal. We explained these things as having family over. However, there was one night in particular I recall. My wife and I had been upstairs in the bedroom watching late-night television, and it must have been around 1 in the morning. Seemingly out of nowhere, we started to hear footsteps, followed by something falling over. This spooked both myself and my wife, as we thought maybe somebody had broken in. Thus, I grabbed the revolver I kept in our drawer, and I head downstairs and start scanning each room. I don't find anyone. However, when I head over to the kitchen, I saw that a glass cup had fallen. It had broken. This was starting to become very strange. But bear in mind, the story has nothing to do with paranormal activity, even though it might seem like it does. Now, I should have gone over to the basement and checked there too, but I explained the cup falling over as a passing vehicle shaking the house. Remember, this is one of those old Victorian-style homes, and it seemed like the only logical explanation. So far, it seems pretty unexplained, right? Well, fast forward some more time, and that's when we would get our answer. My wife and I had been out on an evening date, and we were just getting back to our house around 10 p.m. As we pull up into the driveway, we saw that the kitchen light was turned on, but that wasn't the only thing. For a brief second, we saw what looked to be like a figure pass by it. It looked like a woman. Again, I'm reminding you that this story isn't paranormal, so don't tune out just yet. Anyways, I have my wife wait in the car and call officers as I run up to the home. That's where I enter, and then I yell, "Hello? I just saw you. Who's in the house? You need to come out right now. I already called the police." Just then, I heard what sounded like footsteps coming from the basement. I knew at this moment somebody had broken in, so I head upstairs to grab the revolver yet again. I then run down to the basement, only to find nothing. Try as I did, I scanned the entire room, looking underneath the pool table, checking behind the dryer and the washing machine. And that's when I see something a bit odd. One of the wood panels in the wall was slightly bent. It was almost as if somebody had managed to move it. I, for whatever reason, played around with it for a quick second, and I managed to reveal a little secret room. I couldn't believe it, but that's not what scared me. Since it was so dark in there, I take out my cell phone and I turn on a flashlight. There are a bunch of food wrappers scattered everywhere. There are also water bottles, cans of food, some of our pillows and blankets that had gone missing weeks ago. But to add on top of that, there, sitting in the corner, was a woman with one of our kitchen knives. She looked really pale, with long brunette hair covering her face and her clothes being all ripped up. She looked homeless. So, I remember saying, "Excuse me, but what are you doing in my house? You need to get out of here, right now." She refused, and she said that if I came any closer, she wouldn't mind slicing me up. I guess the revolver wasn't intimidating, huh? Not that I was wanting to use it. Anyways, officers eventually show up 15 minutes later, and after a struggle, which saw a taser being used a few times, she was eventually taken away. As it turned out, she had been secretly living in there for over a year, even when the previous owners were living there. Well, we later talked to the previous owners, and they told us that they were always complaining about the same thing, hearing footsteps at night and having food and other belongings missing. They thought the house was haunted, but it turned out that it wasn't a ghost, but instead a squatter. Oh, and to add on top of all this information, apparently she had memorized our work and sleep schedule, which would explain why she got so comfortable to move around at the hour she did. It just so happened that she made one miscalculation and she was caught. Story number 4. Break-in for the phone? This took place 2 months ago when I was doing some babysitting for some of the neighbors. For some background context, I'm male, 20 years old. Anyways, the 2 boys I was looking after are brothers, and they're aged 5 and 6 respectively. So I recall us spending most of that afternoon playing Super Smash Bros. And watching cartoons. At around 7 p.m., I get a call from their parents, and they're saying they'd be home a little bit later than expected. Apparently, there was a lot of heavy traffic on the freeway, which had seen them arriving at around 8 p.m., was now more looking like 10 p.m. They apologized, and they tell me they'd pay me a bit extra, which was fine by me. Besides, the 2 boys went to bed around 9 p.m. after I warmed up some of their leftovers, and I was finally relaxing watching American Dad and browsing my phone. I remember getting up and heading over to the kitchen to grab a glass of water. That's when I noticed the back porch light turned on. This light was the kind that turns on anytime it detects movement. Well, I found this odd, so I open the back sliding door and I look out into the dark. There's no one, so I wrote it off as a squirrel, since they get a lot of them. I now return back to the living room, and I'm there for about 5 minutes, and that's when somebody knocks on the front door. I let the knocking commence, thinking whoever was out there would eventually leave. But the knocking doesn't stop. It's now I'm starting to get annoyed. I head over to the door, and this is where I make the grave mistake of opening it. There, standing on the front porch, was a man in a hoodie, and he has his hands in his pockets.
Sorry to bother you, but could I come in and use your phone?
I tell him there was no phone, but he kept insisting, saying he was a family friend, and he needed to call my parents. I already knew this guy was out of it, as I didn't even recognize him, nor was this even my house to begin with. I told him he needed to leave, and surprisingly, this seems to work. Even so, I went ahead and called the dad, and I described the stranger who had shown up. No, I don't recognize anybody with that description. And you said he needed to come into the house and make a phone call? Where is he right now? Yeah, that's what he said. I don't think he's around anymore, but let me go and check. Wait, hold on. I couldn't believe what was standing at the back sliding kitchen door. The same hooded man, but he has a knife. That was the least of my concerns, as he seemingly just opens the back door, as if it was nothing. Me, in the rush to check why the back porch light had went on, had forgotten to lock it properly. I book it, running up the stairs, as I hear this maniac begin to chase me. Once I'm inside the kids' room, I move a dresser against the door, as pounding is then heard.
Open the door. I need to use your phone. You need to help me. Please.
The way he was talking sounded as if he was intoxicated. It's at this point the kids had woken up, and they're starting to cry. Not that I could blame them. Don't worry, it's just a friend of mine. He's playing a prank. Don't worry about it. He's not here to hurt us. This is just a game. Bear in mind, I'm doing what I could to calm the kids down, even though deep down inside, I knew the danger we were in was very real. So, I have the kids lock themselves in their bedroom restroom as I called the police. After what seemed like an eternity, the noises and the kicking settled down, and I hear footsteps head downstairs. I thought, Maybe he had finally left. But even so, I stay in the room until the operator lady on the other end says it was okay to step out. I went ahead and gave officers a description, including the fact he had a knife, and they set up an entire perimeter in the surrounding neighborhoods. Less than 10 minutes later, they stop a man who matched the same description I'd given them. The officers then told me that when they tried to get closer, he runs off, but they eventually grab him and find the same knife I had described. So, he was taken away. And yes, he was intoxicated, which explained why he acted the way he did. Story number 5. Break-in with a twist. This doesn't come from the perspective of a kid or a teenager. It comes from a college student. Even so, that doesn't take away from just how frightening of an encounter this was. Now, how's that saying go? Home sweet home? A place where you can escape the people and the world around you and feel like nothing can touch you? Wouldn't it be nice if that phrase could remain intact? Ah, yes, wishful thinking. Nevertheless, I want to talk about a time back around 2015 when I was dealing with a stalker. I'm female, by the way, and I was 23 years old. So it all started about 3 months into my part-time job at Target. I was working in the electronics section, where I was in charge of, you guessed it, electronics. Things like cameras, TVs, video games, you name it. Well, being a girl and working around video games, I did get a lot of guys look at me funny or try to get my phone number. And although annoying, nothing really went too far. One customer in particular pushed the boundary. I don't recall what exactly I was doing, but I felt my hair being grabbed, followed by the smell of bad breath. I turned around and it was this really heavy-set balding man in his early 50s with this very creepy look. I told him to knock it off, and he said he was trying to get a bug out of my hair. I then proceeded to make a big deal, which grabbed the attention of a security guard. The creep leaves on his own, and I thought maybe that would be the final time I would see him. However, over the coming weeks he would show up to the store, but instead of coming up to me, he would just walk around in the electronics section, occasionally walking up to the counter, but never saying anything. One time, I even caught him trying to break into my car, but by the time police arrived, he was gone. Now, I did mention at the beginning of this recollection I was home alone when something happened, right? Trust me, I'm getting there. I just wanted to go ahead and give you some details that leads up to the event. It was a day off from work, and I'm there in my apartment with my German Shepherd Mia. It's around, I'd say, 11 p.m., and I had stepped into the shower. Mia was fast asleep on my bed, something she loved doing. Considering I love to take long showers, I was in there for about 30 minutes, and that's when I heard the front door open. Now, I do have a roommate who we will call Chloe, but she was working late. This is what I found very strange, because the only persons with a key was myself and Chloe. Thinking Chloe had arrived early, I ignore it thinking she would go ahead and text me. I look over to my phone, but no text messages. 5 minutes pass, and still nothing. I was starting to get a bit suspicious, and it didn't help that Mia was whining. So I grabbed my bathrobe, quickly put it on, and I head to the bedroom door to let Mia out. However, I don't even get a second to respond, because standing in the hallway in front of me was the man from Target. He had the creepiest smile I'd ever seen, but that changes when he realizes that a German Shepherd is about to pounce all over his sorry butt. He tries to run, but Mia is able to tackle him to the ground as a knife falls out of his pocket. Mia then proceeds to tear at his jacket while the man is screaming for her to let go. This was my chance. I grab my phone and I call the police. As I kid you not, my roommate Chloe walks in with some groceries, and she has a look of shock. Here's something I forgot to mention about Chloe. She's awesome, and she's actually in the army. Anyways, not only does she make an embarrassment of this dude, but she gets him into a submission hold, like something you would see in wrestling. It was at this point that two of the neighbors, college football players by the way, heard the commotion and they walked over, and they're able to help subdue him along with Chloe until campus police arrived. Needless to say, he later confessed he had fallen in love with me and said that we were meant for each other. He even managed to find out where I lived, and he broke in using a lockpick, if that wasn't creepy enough. Anyways, he had no idea what was awaiting him on the other side of those doors. So I did get a restraining order, and I never did see him again. Story number 6: Wild Chases and Break-ins. I've heard plenty of Home Alone stories on Scary Stories channels before, but I've never thought about writing mine in. Now that it's the Halloween season, I figured it'd be a good time to go ahead and retell it, though thinking about it does give me the chills. Here's what went down. This was many years ago. I'm talking about the late 1990s, and I was home alone, studying for some exams. Things were pretty quiet until about 10 p.m. when I started to hear helicopters and police sirens in the distance. I found this odd, seeing as my Southern California neighborhood is relatively safe. Well, only about 5 minutes pass, and the sirens have gotten extremely loud. On top of that, I can hear the helicopter more or less above my house. So I decide to see what's going on, and I take a peek out the window. Sure enough, I can see a helicopter shining a spotlight around my home and my neighbor's home. Some of the neighbors were also on their front porches watching. Well, I watch a vehicle come to a stop on my front yard. Then, a man steps out, who looked to be armed. He was followed by about 10 police and highway patrol cruisers. The armed man runs into my backyard, as police officers then gave chase. I'm pretty much standing there in disbelief, but then I'm able to hear it, the distinct sound of my back door opening, followed by footsteps and heavy breathing. I didn't know it at the time, but an armed robber who had robbed a pawn shop and even stole a vehicle had led police on a wild chase, and now that chase led into my neighborhood, where he was able to run into my backyard and open the back door, which I'd made the mistake of leaving open. Anyways, what was I supposed to do? Well, I do the only thing I could think of, lock myself in my room, and yell over to the officers from the upstairs window. They tell me to stay put, as I then hear a bunch of officers downstairs in the living room telling someone to drop it and get down on the floor. As you probably already guessed, I'm sitting there behind my bed, rocking back and forth, scared beyond recognition. Finally, after what seemed like hours, but was more like 3 minutes, I heard an officer on a speaker say, "You can come out now. We've already got him." Nervously, I look out the window, and I'm able to see a man being led to a police cruiser in handcuffs. Anyways, that was pretty much the story. I didn't get any studying done the rest of that evening, but I did get interviewed in the local news, so that was kind of cool. Story number 7. All I wanted was a pizza. Seriously, that's all I wanted. I'm referring to the title of my story. Now, I did get the pizza, eventually, but it seemed that a creepy coincidence would take place beforehand. This one's pretty old, by the way. I was roughly 12 or 13, and this was in the mid-2000s. One night, I'd been home alone, waiting for my parents to get back, as they had gone to a wedding. So, with nothing but video games and my pit bull keeping me company, I decided to order a pizza from Domino's. Hi, can I please have one medium pepperoni pizza and some breadsticks? Sure, we'll send your order in about 30 minutes. Thank you. That's just a summary of how the conversation went. Well, those 30 minutes go by, and there hasn't been a sign of the pizza delivery driver. I called the shop once again, and they apologized, saying that they were experiencing a huge demand. If I remember correctly, it was because of a football game on TV. As I explained my frustration, I heard a knock at the front door. Sorry, I think the pizza's here. I gotta go get it. I then head toward the door, excited to get my hands on some cheesy goodness. However, waiting on my front porch isn't a pizza delivery driver, but instead, it was a man in his ski mask, and he has the largest knife I'd ever seen. That sight immediately sent me into a panicked frenzy, so I go to close the door, but he places his boot down. I, being overpowered, choose to run to my pet bull Rocky as the man yells at me to come back. Rocky was seriously overprotective, and without me having to say go get him or anything of that nature, he charges at this masked man as the potential burglar does a complete 180 and runs out of the house. Rocky gives chase, but he eventually stops on my front porch while I watch the masked man jump over into a neighboring backyard. At this point, all the adrenaline started to pump in my body, so I head over to the kitchen and grab the phone. When police got there, they set up a search area, but sadly the masked man had gotten away. As for the pizza, it did arrive shortly after officers got there, and the pizza driver was just as confused and shocked as I was. Nevertheless, our neighborhood was put on watch. Well, fast forward a few weeks later, and there's a story in the news. A home in the neighboring city was broken into by a man with a knife and a ski mask, similar to my case. Same thing happened. Someone knocked on the door late at night, and he forcefully entered with said knife. However, the burglar had no idea that the old man who lived in that home was a U.S. veteran, and he held the robber in his home with one of those old-fashioned Thompsons that he was cleaning in his living room at the time. When I saw that story in the news, I had a really good laugh because justice was served. Now, I don't know for sure whether or not it was the same masked man, but we never heard of any more masked burglars again, so safe to say, it was most likely the same guy. Story number 8. The Not-So-Friendly Salesman. This happened roughly 3 months ago, where I live in central New Zealand. By the way, I'm a huge fan of yours. Nevertheless, it was a random evening at the beginning of July, and I was playing Call of Duty with my friends on Xbox. Now, to quickly describe my home, it's 1 story, 2 rooms and 1 bathroom, and a small attic. The living room is right next to the front door, and next to the living room is the kitchen. In between both is a hallway, which leads to the restroom and the bedrooms. Now, in order to get to the attic, you had to go into my parents' room, where in the closet there is an opening. It was mainly used for storage, but on the occasion I would go up there with my friends, and we would tell scary stories, or play games. Nevertheless, it must have been around 10 or 11 p.m., and I heard the doorbell ring. I tell my friends I would be right back, so I head over to see what the big deal was. I opened the main door, and through the screen door, there's a man in just your average ordinary street clothing.
Sorry to bother you, but I'm selling chocolate and cookies. I'm trying to raise some money. Would you like to buy anything?
Yeah, as if a kid was going to have money. I told him I had none, and I go to close the door. He, however, stops me, and he says that he wanted to talk more about the fundraiser he was doing. I could have cared less, but he offered to give me a free chocolate bar if I listened for just a minute. Fair enough. I stood there listening to his story, but halfway through, I hear a loud crashing noise come from inside the house. The man suddenly drops the box, and he runs over to the side of my home. I was confused, but more so from the crashing sound. Well, little did I know, this so-called cookie and chocolate salesman was distracting me so his partner in crime could break in. From the living room, I could see a whole bunch of broken glass in the kitchen, followed by 2 figures entering the home, with one holding a large crowbar. It's now I realized the house was being robbed, so I do the only thing I could think of. I start booking it to the attic. That's not before I heard both of the robbers yell at me to stop. That wasn't happening. I run into my parents' bedroom, lock the door, then go into the attic, where I must have waited there for easily 10 minutes for officers to arrive. While I awaited their arrival, they broke into my parents' room, and I heard them say something like,
Where'd that kid go? Who cares? Let's just grab what we can get and let's leave. Quick.
Obviously, that wasn't word per word, but they pretty much said something that told me they weren't really looking to cause harm. So, thanks, I guess. Things then eventually went silent, and I heard them leave, but officers still hadn't arrived. It turned out they ended up going to the wrong side of town, and it took them an additional 20 minutes just to get to me. By that point, those two were long gone, celebrating their successful cash in of our valuables. In total, the back glass door was broken, my parents' bedroom door was broken, and a bunch of jewelry and money my parents had saved was stolen. In total, it was easily around 8,000 New Zealand dollars, or as we like to call them, Kiwi dollars. I looked it up for my friends in the States, and it's about 5,000 US dollars. If you're wondering why my parents had so much money, it's because they were looking to put a down payment on a car just using cash. Anyways, about a month later, officers investigated a couple of pawn shops, and they were able to find my mom's jewelry. When they looked at the security footage, they saw the two who had turned it in. They were the same two who broke into my home, which I later confirmed when they talked to me about it. They were eventually caught, and they were put behind bars after being connected with another series of break-ins. And though we never did get the cash back, my mom did get her jewelry, which to her was the most important, as it belonged to her mom, my grandma. Well, looks like we've reached the final story. Through the window. When I was in junior high school, so we're talking about 8 years ago, I always loved to spend time with my friends. We would go to the movies, go down to the beach, and most important, play video games all night. On one of these nights, we had done our usual hangout routine. Go to the beach and hang out all day, then go back to my place and play video games in the basement. And that's what we were doing. The three of us were at my house alone, playing Dance Central, being silly, and having a good time. In the middle of our play session, however, we suddenly heard footsteps from upstairs. Naturally, we turned the sound off on the TV, thinking my parents had arrived. So, I eagerly head up the stairs and open the door ever so slightly. By the way, the basement door is right next to the kitchen, so I'm able to see anybody who might have been in there. Now, instead of being welcomed by the loving embrace of my mom and dad, I instead am able to see two masked men in hoodies searching through the cabinets and the cupboards. I froze as my friends called up to me wondering what the holdup was. Carefully and quietly, I locked the basement door and I tiptoed my way back down, hoping the squeaky steps wouldn't grab the burglars' attention. "What's with the scared look, you big baby? Be quiet. No lie. There are two guys in ski masks up there." My friends thought I was lying, but when I called police, they soon began to realize just how serious the entire thing was. Moments later, we hear the security alarm system go off, which does so anytime a door is opened. This is what I found strange. It hadn't gone off when those two came in, which led me to believe they entered through a window, which the alarm wouldn't activate. Silly, I know, but it was later fixed to activate, even when a window was open. Nonetheless, police officers arrived in about 3 minutes. Once the operator told us to go upstairs, the police searched the house and property, but they found no one. What they were able to find, however, were muddy shoe prints and one of our screens from the windows that had been removed. Honestly, even though nothing happened to my friends and I, that still didn't mean it wasn't one of the more frightening experiences of our lives, and even all these years later, I get nervous anytime I'm home alone. Hello there, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed this week's edition of Scary Stories. Tell me, if you enjoyed it, then make sure to leave a like and a comment. Also, if you're new around here and this is the very first time you watched a video of mine, then make sure to subscribe and turn on those notifications. This channel features stories you're not going to find anywhere else, so just make sure you're ready for endless hours of entertainment. Speaking of entertainment, I highly recommend you go back and watch any videos you might have missed. Lately, lots of you have been missing the uploads, and as those who have been watching know, there's a lot of good content. But anyways, we're halfway through October premiere month here on the Creepy Fox YouTube channel. That means we still have some more content on the way. For sure, expect another episode of Halloween Stories. That should be up next week. Then, we'll go ahead and move on to our themes and topics for Thanksgiving. Still can't believe November is right around the corner. Crazy, right? If you have any suggestions for the month of October, then make sure to let me know too. Nevertheless, we're going to make this outro a little bit shorter than usual. Normally, we do comments with creepy, but I'm really trying to get as many videos out as I can before the vacation I'm leaving on. Obviously, I won't have time to work on videos, so I'm trying to get this video out. By the time you're listening to this, it should be Friday, and then next Tuesday, I'm going to go ahead and do some police stories and security guard stories. Then, like I said, you'll get Halloween stories, and then the week after that, we're looking at either the 30th or the 31st. You'll get some phone call stories, and then you'll get a scheduled video, which will be the coffee shop stories. Anyways, let's go ahead and end with question time. And today's question is this: what do you like to do when you're home alone? Play video games? Study? Clean? Sleep? Let's hear it. Well, that's enough from me. This has been your host, the Creepy Fox, and you've been listening to our Scary Stories podcast. Catch you all next time. Take care, and have an amazing day.